and welcome to the Healing Half. My name is Miki Speer, and I am so glad that you are here. Tonight's topic is none other than forgiveness. And it's so important that we talk about this because next week, this Friday, is 2021, people. Oh my gosh. When you think of 2021 and you think of this new year coming, quick, just drop it wherever the comment section is for you, whether you're watching it live or as a replay. What emotion are you feeling when it's coming into 2021? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you a little scared? You know, thinking this time last year, we had no idea any of this was happening. I'm just kind of curious at where you're at, because for me, 2021, I've got lots of big plans for the show, for my music, for all this stuff. But I can't help but be a little scared, right? Because of 2020 being such a curveball, it almost makes me think similar emotions back to when my mom died after she passed away, which I thought was impossible and that would never happen. I started to think, who else? What else can happen? And so I'm really excited tonight to be talking about how can we start the year with the right mindset, get rid of some of those fears, but also go in with a right heart. And that begins with forgiveness. And before we get to our amazing guest, who I am so excited to be here to have her on the show today, I just want to quickly introduce myself and then we'll get started. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Miki. I am an author, musician, and talk show host of Tonight's Show, The Healing Half. When I was 13, my mom died of cancer. And I spent the better part of a decade running and avoiding from emotion and from feeling and pretending I was fine and trying to convince myself that I was fine. But eventually, you can only run for so long before you start to break down in other areas. And that's what was happening to me. I was crying at the drop of a hat. I had no idea what was going on. The easiest thing was stressing me out. And I realized I had to do something. And eventually it came out of the woodwork that the root of a lot of my issues I was having was unprocessed grief. So I wanted to start a show where we could just talk about this stuff, because all of us are experiencing losses, whether it's a death loss or job loss, divorce, friendships. There's so many types of losses. And one of those components of losses is we don't know how to talk to other people when they're going through it. Who hasn't been at the grocery store and seen somebody you know going through a hard time, and it's awkward and you don't know what to say? So I wanted to start a show that not only addresses our own grief of various kinds, but teaches others who can't necessarily relate to that grief how to help us out. And that's the Healing Half show. And I'm so glad that you are here. I love all your comments in the comment section, so keep them coming. It looks like people are thinking, what else? They're feeling hopeful. So that's good. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, we've got something for you tonight, because we're going to be talking about a topic that we are going to be facing over and over and over again, not only in life in general, but especially with our loss journey. I was thinking about forgiveness and how important it is, as so many people's, it's a tenet of our faith, and yet it's really difficult. In fact, forgiveness is probably the hardest thing. I truly think forgiveness can be the hardest thing to do. And yet it's talked about in the Bible as a necessity. Why is that? How do we do that? Well, that's why we have Donna on the show tonight. So without further ado, please welcome the one, the only, Donna Mathiowetz. Hi, Donna.
Hello, Miki. How are you? Good to be here.
It's so good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Do you mind telling the folks, we've been blessed to have you on the show before, but for those people who haven't met you yet, mind telling them a little bit about yourself?
I sure will. Well, my name is Donna Mathiowetz. I live in Hastings with my husband of 48 years. We have 4 children and 3 beautiful grandchildren. And I've spent over 20 years of my life working, first of all, I guess working through my own grief, coming to a place of healing and wholeness again after the death of 2 children. So I think I'll just tell you a little bit about that story, because it'll give context to what we're going to talk about in a little while here, Miki. Our true grief journey began in 1992. Our son Tim was 16 at the time, and our daughter Jill was 18 and had just graduated from high school. And this particular Friday night, on March 6th of 1992, Tim went to a party. There was about a dozen teenagers there, and a couple other things happening that caused this night to go as tragically as it could have, along with the group of teens who I always say, and just because it's a fact, a known fact, they were there with their yet to be developed brains. The frontal lobe isn't all there yet, and so it causes sometimes really poor judgment and the idea that you're immortal and nothing bad can happen to you, and cause and effect seems to escape many of them at that age, including my son. There was some beer being consumed, and there was a 19-year-old acquaintance with a .44 caliber Magnum handgun. And I talked to Tim on the phone about 8 o'clock that night, and about an hour later, he had been shot and killed with that handgun. So we were put into traumatic grief very abruptly, very suddenly, no warning, and really with little experience at all prior to this. A year and a half after Tim died, we had the opportunity to become parents, a family to a young boy, a 15-year-old boy, who was found in a Ukrainian orphanage by someone that was there helping to coordinate adoptions from that orphanage in Ukraine to the U.S. And Judy, long story short, she knew of Oleg. She really she knew that he had cancer and had gotten some treatment, but on that one last trip to that orphanage, she realized that they had stopped the treatment. They thought they did it well, but they stopped short of really eradicating the cancer from him. But she was determined that there was more we could do here. So she got him here. She was able to find doctors and surgeons and all to give him, his treatment, and also looking then, of course, for a family to be there for him. And again, there's a lot of story with the whole story of Oleg, but needless to say, we said yes to that. And it was a wonderful, he taught us so much. I really actually think if we were called on to do it again, I would, because it was that amazing of an experience that God allowed us to be his vessel for those 6.5 months, because that's how long he did live. And some of it was quality life before the cancer kind of reared its ugly head again. And he did die 6.5 months later from his cancer. So the boys died 2 years apart, March of 92 and March of 94. And Tim was 16 and Oleg was 15. So we became very, very experienced at grief in short order. And, it's quite a teacher. Grief teaches us so much about ourselves, about the people around us, the people we choose to surround ourselves with, about our faith, especially our faith, because we can tend to go one way or the other when these awful things happen, of course. But it's for us, fortunately, God used it because we allowed him to. And, we've been helping other people in this area for well over, probably 25 years now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Donna. I am so sorry for your losses. Obviously, I can't even begin to comprehend the complexities of both of those situations. So I'm really glad that we have you here to help walk us through that. And I think to kind of kick the night off with forgiveness, we're going into 2021. We want to have as much of a clean and a happy heart as possible. And we know forgiveness is a key to that. But I truthfully think so many people don't even realize they have to forgive other people. So the first question I kind of have for you, as someone who unfortunately had to learn how to forgive in the worst of circumstances, something I wouldn't wish upon anybody. You had to learn how to forgive. What was forgiveness like to you before the death of Tim, and how was that kind of challenged after his death?
Well, when I compare things I needed to forgive before Tim's death, caused by another person, I guess I didn't. It was pretty easy. I can't even think of other situations because whenever this topic comes up in conversation or I read about it or I hear, it pains my heart when I hear someone say, I'll never forgive him for that, or I could never forgive him if he did that to, not speaking about me, but whatever their issue is, I hear them say that. There's no way I'll ever forgive them. It's like, it just kind of this pang of my heart, that it's like, oh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. And yet it really is a personal thing, and, my faith makes it very clear we are to forgive just as God forgives us, but of course there's many people out there who don't address that faith at all, and really believe it's just a choice. And you know what, even a Christian or whatever it is, you still have a choice. You don't have to do that, right? We don't, and I would never, I don't tell anyone you really need to work on forgiving him or her for that. Because if they're in the wrong place with all that, it really doesn't help to say that to them. But I just share my story. And that's what I love about our stories, right? Our testimonies, they're ours. I saw something you had written where our mess becomes our message and our test becomes our testimony. So I really believe that to be so true. And, so I can share my story. And, when I tell them that my husband and I both chose to forgive the 19-year-old kid that shot and killed our son, I think it kind of puts them into a perspective like, wow, if she can forgive that. And I remember being super sensitive to this kind of thing for the first maybe few years after Tim died, because I had no patience with people who would dare to hold a grudge or complain or act in an unforgiving way. I wanted to say, do you realize what happened to us and that we were able to forgive? So don't tell me you can't. You want to have this little pep talk with them, but I realize that doesn't win them over very well if I make them feel guilty about it. Besides, now they carry around unforgiveness and guilt because they didn't, and shame, and I don't need to put that on them. That's not helping. But it's just such an important piece. And so let me tell you how it came about. This forgiveness for the 19-year-old who brought the gun to the party, at some point put it to Tim's head. And it was, first of all, it was not done there was not a fight. It wasn't out of anger. It was simply foolishness. It was, the beer had skewed judgment on more than one person's part. And so the defenses went down, and my smart 16-year-old son, Tim, I think would have known better had he not had a couple of beers already. And it's, it just what it does. That's what beer does. That's what alcohol does to people, right? It makes us feel all loose and and happy and, oh, we're fine kind of thing. So I trust that's what happened in that situation too. But the way the forgiveness came about, and I write more about this in my book, Miki. I love this part of my book because I think it's such a big part of what I want people to learn from what we learned. But after Tim died, we had this property, and it was already a mess financially, and we ended up losing it. So Tim died in March, and in July we had to leave the house because the sheriff's sale and all that went with that. So before Tim died, this was a big deal. We spent months and months trying to figure out how we could save all this. And once he died, it was like, whatever, fine, take it. We're done. We don't have the energy to deal with this. But the one of the bad parts of that was, we tell people not to make any big changes for at least the first year. Well, we didn't have a choice. So he died in March, and in July we were moving out of that place. And so we moved, and we got to this wonderful place in the country. We were able to rent this cute little house in the country with the apple trees and the deer coming up near the house and eating the apples out from under the tree. And it was just wonderful. And it was 5 miles west of town. And it was, what I realized after we had gone to look at it that one Saturday morning, it was about 1.5 miles from where Tim was when he died. This farm place was just across the field, basically. And I love to walk. It was, I think walking is great for many reasons. And so I continued to do my walking. And if I walked, I could walk 2 different directions from our house. And one of them brought me closer to their home where it happened. And so it was on one of these walks when I really feel God was working on me. He was working on my heart, and he kind of reminded me in a few ways of the struggle that other family was having. We were being supported. We were the victims, and people were doing all they could to help us from various churches in our Hastings community and friends and family and all that. I knew that was not what they were receiving. For the most part, it was pretty tough for them to do much of anything and be seen in Hastings because of the publicity that went with this. It was very, very well known in the press and all that. So it had become quite a public matter. And anyway, as I thought about them, I thought to myself, I wouldn't want to trade places with them. I mean, they still have their son to a degree, but he now is in St. Cloud. He served a sentence for second-degree manslaughter, and they lost a lot that day as well. And so then from there, God just kind of started to speak to me about forgiveness, and that's how it happened. I talked to my husband what I felt was happening to me, and he was in agreement with me, which was also a real miracle and a blessing, because many times when a child dies, part of the issues they're deal with is parents trying to figure out how to do this together. And in some cases there can be blame because maybe one parent was more responsible. There can be all kinds of messy things that happen. But for both of us to come to an agreement about forgiveness, I thought was a wonderful thing, because had he not agreed, it could have caused quite a rift for us, that I forgave, he couldn't, whatever that might mean. But we did it together. And so, I wrote a letter to the young man while he served time a couple times, and I expressed our forgiveness, and, left it at that. And I knew I had done my job, and however he dealt with that was up to him. Right. So, I knew that I had done what God asked me to do, what he asked us to do. And it was, and before that, I'll take you back a little bit to a prayer, which I think is all part of this. So the night that Tim died, my husband was 110 miles away. He got home at 4:30 in the morning. People all left who'd been there with me all night. And Dick and I sat down on the couch at 5 o'clock that morning, and we held hands, and we had this simple prayer that my husband had kind of received a nudge from the Lord as he was coming back to Hastings. That God just really instructed him, saying, you need to give me the destructive anger. And so we prayed that night, and the prayer was simple. It was, Lord, would you please take the destructive anger from us? And I'm so sincere when I say this. We never spent any time being angry, not destructive anger. I mean, and I'm not saying anger isn't, an expected emotion, because look at there's amazing things people do with their anger after tragedy, right? I think of the mother who started MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That was after her teenage daughter was killed by a drunk driver. And, there's many stories like that if people have taken that righteous anger and done something amazing with it to help other people. And so, but it's the destructive anger that can act like a cancer in a person, which spreads to family and friends. And and I know people who carry that kind of anger years, decades later, and their life has been miserable. And I think it's just such a sad thing. When I always talk about what would our kids want, or what would your mom want, or, I say this is not what they would want for us. They would want us to take this. We can't change it. We can't bring Tim or Oleg back. You can't bring your mom back. So what do we do with this? Right. I was far too young to live out the rest of my life here on earth, becoming, cynical and angry and wanting revenge. It's just, to me, it's just that sounds horrible. That would be as horrible as Tim's death was, if that's how I was going to live out the rest of my life. So I think forgiveness is just it's the only healthy option out there. And yes, God says, forgive us. We say, forgive us our trespasses, that we forgive those who trespass against us. So we're asking God to forgive us in the amount that we're able to forgive others. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of a big deal, right? It really
It is
is.
a big deal. Oh my gosh, it is a very big deal. And I love that, like you said, the differentiator between anger and destructive anger. And I'm going to clarify that just to make sure I'm understanding it. Is
Yeah,
destructive anger, I wish ill upon
right.
him. Like I want him to get hurt. I
Yeah,
don't care. But the
yes.
regular anger is more, I'm just mad at the situation that this is happening,
Yeah.
that it happened.
Yeah, I'm angry that we have to live this,
Yeah.
out. And and when uh, now I it's 29, almost it'll be 29 years in March since Tim died, and I still find myself with I don't know if it's anger, maybe a little resentment, like when I have to deal with again the holidays, or his
Mm.
birthday was just the 19th of December. He would have been 45, and the hard days that come, or hours at least that come with it, it's like, I am really tired of this. That's what I
Yeah.
say to myself. And so then I feel, it's not, I don't know if it's really even anger. It's just more like
Mhm.
frustration. And it's like, gee, I've been doing this a long time.
Okay, and in those
Yeah.
moments of frustration, because I've
Yeah.
heard the saying that forgiveness is it's not this one time thing. It's over and
No.
it's over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
So I guess could you walk us through how did you do that? And I know you mentioned you wrote a letter, which is great.
Mhm.
How did you let go of that? What did that look like? And then how did you keep doing it as those things started to boil up? Like you said, whether
Yeah.
it's directly anger or more resentment or jealousy,
Yeah.
all of that can come
Yeah.
back to this person
Yeah.
did this to me.
Yeah, I don't know. God did a work in us. Someone asked me long, long ago, how do you, like, maybe for their own knowledge, how do I know that I've really forgiven them? And you already kind
Mm.
of said something about that, Miki. It was, when I thought of him, or a couple times, many, many years ago, I did see him in Hastings, just, in a car or whatever. And I checked my spirit then, and even then, I didn't want anything bad for him. In fact, I prayed that his life would be okay, or maybe better than okay, and that maybe he could take what he learned, because he's living out this his whole life. It really is true. I mean, the punishment goes far beyond spending some time in prison or whatever.
Mm.
I've never been in that position, never want to be, but
Right.
when you're responsible for someone else's life, that's a pretty, I don't think it's much harder than that. So I knew that he was going to have to live with this the rest of his life, and I didn't want him to have a bad life. There's enough people out there with bad lives. We didn't need one more, and Tim wouldn't want that either. Tim wouldn't have said that, that's what he would have wanted for him either.
Wow, I'm like crying over here at the beauty of everything you just
I know.
said.
I know.
Wow. So thank you so much for your wisdom. What are some misconceptions? And I love that you said Tim wouldn't have wanted that.
No.
So, and that kind of leads me to the thought of what are some misconceptions about forgiveness that you hear that you just want to address head on and be like, this is not going to happen if you forgive?
Well, you really, forgiveness is probably a little bit, some might say it's selfish, because it really is more for, it was more for me,
Okay.
because I couldn't control how he would receive it. I didn't,
Yeah.
and I had to let go of that. When I wrote that letter and put it in the mail that day, I couldn't send it with this hopes that my ideal with this, here's what I hope you do. It wasn't about that. I didn't tie any strings to it. I'll forgive you if you sit down and look at me when you get out of prison and we talk. I invited him to do that. I did. I invited him that if it would be helpful to him, that I would do that. We would do that. That didn't happen, and that's okay. I didn't count that as something that was going to hold back my ability to obey what I knew I needed to do.
No
Um,
contingencies. I
no
love it.
contingencies. Yeah, no strings attached to it. It was me freeing, was us freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying it. because it's not meant to be carried like that. And it is a burden. Believe me, as I said, I've known far too many people that I know that's their burden is, and you mentioned unresolved grief, that as you for a decade tried to find every way around and under and over the top of grief, and you realized at a very young age that it wasn't possible, and it's not. And that's why getting help for grief is so important. And that's why we do, providing grief groups and writing and using social media to help and doing things like your show is how I can give back and hope to help a few other people along the way.
Oh, well, Donna, I am so grateful. I'm over here sobbing. Oh my gosh, tears stained face at your story. And it inspires me because if you can forgive the person who killed your son, like you said, it does put it in perspective of the things that we all hold on to, of what can we let go of. So as we kind of wrap up, a couple minutes left here, I want you to kind of take the stage and feel free to talk a little bit more about your book, any closing thoughts, and then I'll wrap up at the end.
All right. Well, thanks, Miki. The time just goes way too fast, doesn't it? Well, I just want, as we look to, 2021, Miki, before we started the show, we chatted about this just a little bit, and, and some people may be going into this with different types of feelings. For me, I'll speak personally. I go into it with not the same attitude as I try to go into every new year. And I'm not a big resolution kind of person, but I do tend to want to set some goals. And, from my standpoint of my business, I love speaking to many different groups. That's really how I met Miki, through her mother-in-law, Tammy. Hi, Tammy. I see you're on the call tonight. So that's really my passion is speaking to groups and getting face to face with people who are hurting and giving them a hug and listening to their stories and giving them the encouragement that I can. And I've, expanded into writing. I've written a journal for your journey. And with that, I created the Journey card deck. And then most lately, one of the good things that happened out of COVID for me is I completed a second book. It's called What Have You Done Since I Left? And that kind of refers to Tim and him someday possibly asking us to share everything we've done since he's left. And we want to be able to have a good report. And so we're working on that day by day. And so but as we go into 2021, I think this little, it's not little, the whole idea of forgiveness, I would love for people to take a look introspectively and say, is there someone that I really need to forgive? And however you do that, and if it's something that someone did to you, and I think we hear this all the time in forgiveness, we're not condoning anything, any harm anyone caused you, and it doesn't mean you should be around those people if it's not safe. All those things are important to remember, but I think people really sell short the quality of life that you can have if you will just make forgiveness part of it. Life is short and there's problems out there, and I think we can tell that sometimes if we look at what's the little things, it's things that we can really move forward, go over it. Let's move forward from it, and let's just strive for better relationships as we move forward. So, but we'll do the best we can. I think 2021 for me is a challenge because I like to make plans. I like to have something to look forward to, be it a few weeks out of Minnesota for the winter, and not just for me, for most everyone. It's all on hold, isn't it? And that's so it makes me wonder, well, what is 2021? And I guess it'll be what we make it, right? It'll be whatever we make it to be. And we've learned a lot in the last 9 months, and I guess there's some more to learn. But we continue to love those around us and be of influence that will put a smile on someone else's face.
Well, Donna, I am so grateful for you, for your wisdom, and for your just powerful testimony that you shared with us tonight. So thank you for being here. Everybody, head to her website. It's in the comments. I posted it a couple times. Pick up her books. They're phenomenal. And get on her email list. You do not want to miss all things Donna. So Donna, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Miki. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You guys, forgiveness is one of those topics that we have to make a priority and actually ask ourselves, do I have to forgive someone? Is there something I have to let go of? Because, as Donna kind of alluded to, it's really easy to not. It's really easy just to hang on to it, just kind of get angry every once in a while and then get busy and move on to something else. I know for me personally, with my own story, my mom went to the doctor many months before she got diagnosed, and they just never caught the cancer. And that's so again, it's a very different story than Donna's, but even the system of medicine and how could these doctors miss these obvious hindsight signs of colon cancer and not think to test her in a way that could have saved her life? Because with colon cancer, time is extremely important. But there's also other systems that come with loss. Perhaps you're upset that you were not able to be with your loved one if they passed away this year in a hospital. Perhaps you're upset that you weren't able to have a funeral. Maybe there's a system in play in this world that led to your person dying prematurely. There's a lot of forgiveness that needs to happen around almost every single loss I can think of. And so this year, let's go into 2020 with pure hearts, letting that go. And like Donna said, it doesn't make it right, but it means we're not wishing ill upon them and we're not holding it against them. And if you would like a little bit of help with forgiveness, part of my book, of my grief workbook, My Heart Still Remembers, the third part of it, there's a bit that can help you work through that forgiveness. And just a reminder, if you sign up for my email list, you get that for free. And that is literally ending on Thursday. So if you haven't signed up yet, head on over to Miki Speer and do that soon. But you can always buy a hard copy anytime you want. And that's also going to be on sale right before the end of the year. So I am so grateful for each and every one of you. I'm going to leave you with this quote because this is one that I think is just absolutely beautiful. Supposedly it's by Mark Twain. However, it's a little fishy on if he actually said that. Regardless, whoever came up with the quote, I think it's pretty powerful, especially when I think of the smell that comes with it. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. One of the most merciful things you can ever do, one of the best acts of selflessness you could ever do is to forgive. And I think that's what we're called to do for so many reasons. So it's so great to see you. If you haven't yet liked the page, let me know you're here in the comments, and I will see you next week. Have a great week, you guys.